Good afternoon, SA Club members. Hope we're all doing very well. And we're back after a brief period of limited lives, should we say. But yeah, we are back and present. Hope we're all doing very well. As prescribed, we are back today to talk about how we went from houses to hotels. We've got a fair amount to talk about. One of the reasons we've been away is because, yeah, we have been setting up a couple of hotels concurrently, which has taken a fair bit of work and impacted on our social media schedule, shall we say. But yeah, Chris is actually coming to you live from one of our hotels now. He's just taking a bedroom for himself. But yeah, I thought in terms of format, just to get things going, guys, we quickly talk about our overall journey, quote unquote, and then we kind of dive more specifically into the things we're finding out now and try and convey as many lessons and sort of teachings as we can from where we are. Because we're not going to profess we are newbie hoteliers in every way, shape and form. We are not heavily experienced. Service accommodation, I'd like to say we've got a fair bit of knowledge about now, but obviously we are very much learning as we go. There are a lot of principles, I think Chris would agree, that do transfer over, but essentially everything is times 10, including costs. Yeah, it's kind of a lot of underlying principles, but equally there's a lot of stuff that you don't have to do with service accommodation, which when you upgrade to essentially a commercial business premise, like a hotel, you can become involved. You got any kind of thoughts, like just generally, Chris? I'm going to go into a sort of backstory. If not, have you got any like opening remarks?
No, not really. Yeah, it's definitely things that you can transfer over from the service accommodation. But as we've quickly found out that it's a very different and difficult beast. Very enjoyable, but yeah, there's a certain amount of nuances that you need to be aware of.
Cool, awesome. Just for those of you that don't know, I'll give you a very brief sort of backstory to how we got into service accommodation, now hotels. So we got our first SA unit in November 2019 in the sunny city of Newport, South Wales. That was a semi-detached house, and we kind of did that on the rent-to-rent model. 4 months, I think we secured a couple more units. One of them was rent-to-rent, one of them was our first management deal. So we started off quite slowly, to be honest. But almost not coincidentally, but perversely is probably a better term. In March, as and when the first sort of ramifications of COVID became apparent here in the UK, pretty much at the same time, we started to massively expand our business, which in some regards not a match made in heaven, but fortunately we found a business model which actually kind of worked despite being in a lockdown. So yeah, we rapidly sort of grew our business from there. And realistically, we come to the point sort of tail end of last year where we sort of sold quite quickly past 50 units. And now we've decided to sort of start venturing down the multi-unit model more specifically. So we're going to continue to do houses and apartments and sort of build our business on that. And we've got our own housekeeping teams, maintenance teams, booking teams, and so on and so forth now to support that. But in terms of efficiencies and also sort of growing our business the way we want to, we really want to look at bigger projects because in many ways, actually, while they're more difficult compared to sort of setting up, 20 individual units, one hotel was actually, I'd say, less work. It might not seem like it at the time, I suppose, but it's probably less work to do one hotel than it is to do 20, 30 houses, which have got similar outlays kind of as a comparable. So yeah, that's kind of where we were and where we are now, like managing sort of essentially once these hotels are live, we'll have over 150 units on our books to manage across South Wales and Southwest England. And so yeah, that's briefly where we are. But yeah, so why did we get into hotels? I kind of started to touch on it already, but I think in business in general, we want to grow quite rapidly. We've got quite a big aspirations. Our main model has been using service accommodation management up till now to sort of grow, and we're sort of following that model still with hotels. But we're in a position where we think there's a huge amount of pent-up sort of hospitality demand here in the UK, which obviously at the moment has been suppressed by the lockdowns, but actually this market's going to return back at some point. I think what we're kind of hoping for in some regards is that we're going to take some of the individuality and sort of some of the systems and processes that we've applied to service accommodation and transfer them to hotels. So sort of gaps we see in the market are boutique hotels and apartment hotels. Now the two we've taken on, we're not going to be converting necessarily to apartment hotels immediately, but we can definitely put our own spin on them in terms of, just going for that boutique vibe, going for that individuality, and essentially not just being another generic listing on booking.com, something that's going to catch the eye, etc. And also use a lot of systemization that we kind of built in to our SA business to kind of help with our hotel business. But yeah, I think it's a massive opportunity. At the moment, the reality is the hospitality sector is not in the best place. There are a lot of hotels that have closed, some of them permanently, some of them just sort of temporarily to reduce costs. There are a lot of guest houses and B&Bs in the UK as well, that are sort of independent ones that are in a similar position. So a lot of them, dare I say it, and I have to be pretty blunt here, they're not keeping up with the times. Their marketing strategies for actually getting bums on beds they're just not current, and they're not getting the sort of occupancy. And as a result, I think for anyone in the service accommodation market, there are a lot of opportunities if you go out there and look for them in terms of trying to find rundown guest houses, B&Bs, hotels, either for rental or for purchase. Because there are a lot of people that own these businesses and they're kind of locked into them, to be honest, because they're struggling to sell them. Because most other people looking at them aren't really seeing the opportunity. And I think especially the apartment hotel model is something we're very, very interested in, whereby you essentially have hotel rooms with a kitchenette in, so they become a studio. I think that fits the model more this year, especially more than others, because there are more people who want self-contained accommodation where they can self-cater. And I think also it's a model that sort of lends itself to people booking longer term, because again, because it's their own room and they can leave stuff there and be self-contained. That's a lot better a model, I think, now than hotels where people are kind of inclined to still have to use the restaurant and kind of go out every time they want something. I mean, again, it's kind of a generational thing, I suppose, that a lot more people are happy to sit in their room on the Wi-Fi watching Netflix instead of actually going out and talking to real people face to face. So yeah, any thoughts on any of my rambling so far, Chris?
Ramblings. Just going back to the journey, just to elaborate on a couple of points which kind of not forced, but kind of directed us in a certain way. We were fortunate enough to be in touch with Martha and Andrew back in, I think we were going back February time. They're an SA provider in Newport, and they do things very, very differently from the normal SA kind of strategy, where they actually live in their house. And I'm sure they won't mind me saying that they live in their house and rent the rooms out whilst they're renovating, and they enjoy that lifestyle. And it kind of got us thinking that it's actually a really good strategy to kind of take these bigger houses and rooms under one roof and create that SA isolated apartments or rooms without giving bed and breakfast. So we're kind of milking that property for all it's worth. So myself and Ben kind of come up with the idea then of kind of taking the outdated or slightly outdated guest house model, adapting it to serviced accommodation, not providing bed and breakfast, but giving people the opportunity to, as Ben rightly said, just do what they can within the confines of their room and rent that out room by room. Then that got us thinking about guest houses. We kind of started thinking about that as a strategy. And then as we've gone along, we've kind of directed ourselves into hotels. So that was a little bit of the journey, but it's quite poignant because there's no one way of doing SA. I think you'll agree, Ben. There's a lot of different things that you can learn from different people and the ways that they do things as well. And we had adapted that quite quickly and just thought, how can we kind of take what they're doing on board and then adapt it quite quickly? So where we've gone from apartment and houses, it was that nugget of information that we kind of took on board quite quickly and thought, yeah, do you know what? There's a lot of guest houses out there that are struggling. They're outdated, as you rightly said. In some circumstances, we couldn't even find the hotel B&B guest house on any platform at all. And it was a struggle to find a website even to, so the marketing was slightly outdated as well. And we felt, and we do feel, that we can do that a little better and kind of bring it up to the times.
Yeah, agreed. I think just in terms of the complementary streams, so we've kind of built up relatively in many areas we operate. We've got good direct booking contacts. We're sort of achieving pretty good occupancy even now. And I genuinely think that actually on a larger scale and a model that we want to kind of apply elsewhere in the UK, if we've got a decent amount of service accommodation units and hotels, you can sort of use one to feed the other, because there'll be times when you run out of SA units, and equally there'll be times when your hotels are hopefully kind of doing very well. And there are very few operators that sort of do both. So you've either got your hotel or you've got your SA units in town, and actually having the ability to essentially transfer guests between the two when you kind of one's doing better than the other, I think is actually quite compelling, powerful and unique. So I think that's something that's going to massively benefit us with these couple of units. It's just the ability to basically go, look, sorry, we're out of, contractor houses. But on the other hand, if the hotels is not full and we prefer to at least have some money in, we can just offer them a compelling rate in the hotel and kind of backfill. So it kind of like balances both out, and it's better to have obviously some occupancy than none. So
yeah, prime example of that, we had an engineer that's come to the hotel and he was looking, funnily enough, for a place to stay, but for health and safety purposes, we can't rent that out. But funny old thing, we've got some properties in Newport, so we've managed to claw some of that money back from the engineers from there. But it's the same principle. Where we're full in one area, we can divert to the other. So very complementary in that aspect.
I agree. That's kind of like why we got into hotels. I suppose the succinct answer to that is we spotted an opportunity. And I'm probably guilty in many regards of having a little bit of shiny penny syndrome, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I suppose. Like, that, and that. But actually, equally, I'm aware of that. So I kind of rein myself in as well, up to a degree. But the reality is, a lot of what people have learned and done in their service accommodation businesses does obviously complement the hotel model. So I think it's not too much of a divergence to obviously sort of move on to that track. It does complement it. So that's something I would say for anything. One thinking, I don't want to sort of like split forces too much. Actually, I think the two can mutually exist under a decent business model. So yeah, the next question I've got here is, how did we get into hotels? And it's quite an expansive question. I mean, as Chris said, in some regards, things kind of just happened, but equally that's not entirely true, because we haven't just sat at home for the last year and a half watching Netflix. So it's not been quite that easy. And in all regards,
some of us, Ben.
Some of us, yeah. We've done a fair amount to sort of push ourselves here. I'm a big fan of sort of mindset and sort of thinking big. And the reality is, if we hadn't started looking for these opportunities and gone out, done viewings, and gone, you know what, let's make this happen, we wouldn't be here now. I mean, for those of you watching this, I think these are more general business principles anyway, but we are very lucky to work with a number of very excellent investors, essentially, who sort of see and share the vision that we have and have put a lot of trust in us to basically sort of help them get a great return on their money, but equally they sort of believe we're going in the right direction. They kind of share what we want to do. So this is just a more general business principle, not specific to SA, but I would sort of encourage any of you thinking of going big in your SA businesses and go for multi-unit deals, that you will always run out of your own money at some point, and that will always massively limit your growth. There's not really been any big business ever that has grown. There are some minor examples, but the majority of businesses that have grown to a big size and beyond have done so by working with other people. And so that's a principle I would convey, that, if you want to get into hotels, firstly, you want to be positioning yourself and sort of starting to work with investors and kind of, understanding that, so you can kind of structure win-win situations for yourself and investors to sort of build up together.
I think that's the key as well. Just jumping in there, Ben, is working with investors. In mine and Ben's eyes, I think it's quite a simple thing. Do the numbers work? Do the numbers work for us? Do the numbers work for the investors? Mm-hmm. And can we, hand on heart and ethically, give them the returns that they expect? These are obviously uncertain times at the moment, so the open and transparent approach to everything has been key. And I think that's also allowed us to expand and get the investors on board with us because of that trust factor. Would you agree, Ben?
No, agreed. And I would say also start small. So don't start casting out for investors when you've got a little background in SA or business in general. Service accommodation is a perfect platform because you can start working with people on individual rent to SA units to sort of prove yourself and obviously understand various models. And then you can kind of work towards bigger stuff and obviously work either with the same investors or bring new ones on board who at least you've got that proof that you've done projects before to kind of build yourself up. So I suppose that some of it was just, obviously we had to earn our stripes in the SA world before moving into hotels. But equally, we built up the investor base. We built on sort of the base of customers as well, because obviously we understand the demand far more in areas than we sort of would have done just going straight in with a hotel. Cool. So go on to the next one. I've definitely got my views on this question, but Chris is going to have a lot of input on this. What issues have we encountered? I'll just throw a couple out there and then Chris can go crazy, basically. Clearly there are a lot more nuances to running a hotel than a serviced accommodation unit. It's a whole different ballgame, really. I mean, every number has another digit on the end, or two, essentially, which I think is fair to say. There's a lot more ramifications from the perspective of health and safety, insurance, ongoing maintenance, business rates, etc., because it is a completely different ballgame. Fire risk assessments, all the kind of things that you kind of might touch on with an SA business and might even be able to do in-house in some regards. For all of these things, when you're kind of going big, you need to really be bringing in external partners who are completely qualified just to give yourself that complete coverage. Chris is itching to talk. Go.
Yeah, so I think right from the outset, when you're starting off in SA as a strategy, you're starting off small with a limited amount of staff, because you've got to keep that profit margins. As you grow, more staff are coming on board, and you don't necessarily still have the kind of the constraints from a legislation point of view, health and safety and risk assessments, etc., etc. When you start delving into the kind of hotel world, it's very much a game of getting things completely legal, completely compliant. And I think the struggle that we've seen right from the outset is the importance of all these things that need to be in place. For this project, particularly, we've been on now for 2.5 weeks. I think we're potentially around a week and a half to 2 weeks out for go live on the first floor. But there are a number of things that we need to consider, mainly from the staff perspective. So in most SA businesses, you'll try and be as lean as possible, and certainly we have, although we've got a number of key people in place. And we purposely did that. There's a lot of implications with regards to health and safety, human resources, and all the rest of it that you need to put in place before you start thinking about the profitability. So you've done your due diligence and looked at the numbers, they stack, but you've got to look at the staff because they're the most important thing, the guest safety, etc., etc. So there's a number of things that we've come across now. Luckily, that we can also transfer over into the SA business as well. So where we've kind of not had to look at certain elements of the SA business, now that we're forced into this realm of hotels and compliance, we can now look to the SA business to kind of retrofit the things that we've kind of missed out on to make sure that we're 100% bulletproof. We're now a growing business, Ben, and I don't think we factored in initially the amount of compliance that we'd have to go down. What else is there? Cost factor. So everything's multiplied by 10. And for some reason, every quote that we get is around 1,200 for anything. But yeah, costings, I think, is a massive key. So complete transparency in whatever the financial implications are. First and foremost, though, is getting that compliance up and running. Any other thoughts, Ben?
I think it's not an issue, but actually a positive in some regards. A project like this, going really big. You shouldn't be getting into it and then trying to do it all yourself. We've been lucky enough, we've been able to bring in sort of expertise straight away to help us on the project, which you don't get with SA as much. So
yeah, I completely agree.
You can actually bring in specific dedicated resource to deal with it because just of scale of the project, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's actually the key point, really. And the key takeaway from us is that with SA, you can put your own stamp on things, your own personalities, your own ethics, your own thoughts on what is right and wrong and what you should be doing from a legal compliance perspective. But when it comes to a project like this, the experts are the key. You cannot do it all. So fundamentally, and this needs to be taken into consideration for cost, but fundamentally you need to bring in the experts and you need the certifications, you need the sign-offs, the risk assessments, and it's bringing in those professionals. The other thing that we did do, and I think we've done right from the start, was to bring in the personnel to kind of project manage. So where I've never been a hotelier and would never profess to be a hotelier, and neither has Ben, we've brought people in from the hotel industry to assist this process, which has been absolutely key to the whole.
We've learned so much from these people. That's the thing. It's like literally it's been like hotel boot camp for us. We're
Yeah, in 2.5 weeks, I've learned so much. I'm so grateful for, just from a business perspective as well, just to take away what I should be doing to look after my staff, what I should be doing to be compliant, what I should be doing to think about costings in any project. So very grateful for that, and a great learning point for me. And it's bringing in these experts to kind of go through that with you, because you're living and breathing the project from a day-to-day perspective, and you're constantly learning. So yeah, one thing we did was bring in an assistant manager in right from the outset with 20 years experience. Head housekeeper, again, 20 years experience in the industry, and they hit the ground running. Absolutely critical for us. Probably the main point there, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, these people are out there. That's the thing as well. There's no two bones about it at the moment. The majority of the hospitality industry is not in the best place for obvious reasons. And there are a lot of amazing people out there that are looking for roles and they've got a wealth of experience. They're only looking for work through no fault of their own due to the obvious circumstances. So yeah.
Going off the back of that then, Ben, what's your projections? So why hotels now? The hotel industry is, as you say, on the backside. Why are we doing it now?
That's a good question, Chris. That's my default answer. I'm thinking of a millisecond, giving myself a bit more time to think an answer, which ironically I'm still doing by saying this. Yeah, I mean, the reality is no one can predict the future. Me and Chris come from a background in the military where we had to make assessments, and realistically, this terms such as first mover advantage, etc., and just generally in investment, if you don't do anything, you sit on your hands, you're not going to be anywhere. And Chris and I could have made the decision back in November to not even bother doing serviced accommodation. Clearly, COVID is a massive factor in what's going to happen this year. There are enough positive indications that I honestly believe that things are now going to continue moving in the right direction. Are there going to be hiccups? Absolutely. But at some point, you've got to think, no, things are going to start lining back the right way. Fingers crossed, vaccine, we will see lockdown ending at some point in the near future. And hopefully this will be the last lockdown that we see. Can't promise it, purely my assessment, so don't send angry letters in the mail. Not that you have my address, but if you did, etc. So yeah, at the moment we are struggling, but I think we've got a unique selling point with regards to sort of overlaying our SA expertise and actually sort of appealing to a wider demographic through the sort of current networks we've already got in terms of clientele. Also, the fact that we're going to upscale this particular project to sort of fit a niche in the market. And we've always been a big fan of niches. I like service accommodation because I still consider it a niche. Many of the areas we operate, I think we've kind of like got big market shares quite quickly because essentially it was quite a niche strategy that we were employing. And also, dare I say it, we have got what I would consider a very good deal on that hotel between us and our investors, because obviously the market right now, if things were booming and you were packing out all 62 rooms every night, we wouldn't have got what the deal we've got on that hotel. So it's a bit of you can't have your cake and eat it, I suppose. If you wait for the perfect unicorn deal, you're going to be sat around for quite a while. So
just to reiterate those points, I think that we've done our assessments. We come from an assessment background. And as Ben rightly said, we can either sit back and do nothing and let these deals go. But again, we wouldn't have got to where we were now if we'd have done that. We could have quite easily sat in and around the 10 property mark and kind of comfortably rode out COVID-19. But we chose not to, and we chose to kind of go on with that. When it comes to the hotels, I think, again, looking at numbers, because that's where the basis of everything starts, we started to realize that we could actually get some pretty good deals, and there's room for a lot of negotiations with landlords and rental costs, etc. So balancing that up with the assessments that we feel is honest and true, that's where we kind of basing things on. For this hotel specifically, in the centre of Newport, we're kind of opening it up to the key workers and contractors and to whatever the tier level dictates at the time, and go floor by floor. So we're not going to rush into this and open the entire thing. We want to do it one floor at a time, build up that customer base, and we factored that into the costs and the profit margins as well. So it's something that we've looked in depth at, just learning as we go along.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a well-known phrase in investment in general, which is observe the masses and do the opposite. And at the moment, a lot of people are still sat about going, when will the market recover? And some of them even ask me for a specific date. So I give it them. I'm like, yeah, fine. If you want me to actually give you a date, I'll give you a date and a time if you really want. But nobody knows. So we can only make what predictions we can. And I suppose we're kind of almost starting to answer this next question anyway. But what are our plans for this hotel? And I think Chris is talking about our kind of opening strategy. But again, I'm a massive believer in sort of what's the unique selling point of why this hotel. There's other hotels in cities, and some of them are actually closed, in all fairness, during COVID. So why do we think we can make a go of this? Well, we think this particular one that Chris is sat in is an extremely compelling product. So it's extremely nice building. It's got extremely good facilities and extremely high standard. We don't think we're going to struggle. Sort of, it's currently about a 3.5-star hotel. I don't know if there's such thing as a 3.5-star, but that seems to be the general consensus online. We think just with a bit more polish and just pushing things up a little bit further, we'll be able to get this hotel to a 4-star. But then we're going to go back to, and this is actually falling back on our mantra for serviced accommodation and business in general. We think we're going to be able to provide a product in that hotel which significantly exceeds expectations. So we're going to be able to charge a good price, and the product's going to significantly exceed it. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to take the place that Chris is on, because of pretty much that reason. We think it's a very compelling product, and we've looked at the numbers and what we know we can charge to make the numbers work for us. It just feels like a very good deal. And that's exactly the same principle we've had in serviced accommodation, is renting this house for X amount a night. Does that feel like I'm actually getting ridiculous value? And I genuinely think with that hotel, that's exactly what we're going to be able to offer.
Yeah, definitely. I think right from the start, I think we said what we're going to do is we're going to do service accommodation, but we're just going to do it better. And we're not going to get greedy on anything. We've got a marketing strategy for the hotel to kind of run it as is at the moment. As Ben said, it's in a very, very, very good condition at the moment. And then we're going to seek to kind of uplift that and uplift the star rating where possible, and just give a very good product. Ben mentioned the location. The location is in our goldmine area of Newport, South Wales. We're right by the train station. I think if I look outside now, I can see the train station. There's a lot of positives to being in Newport Town Centre, and there's not a lot of hotels. There's a lot of hotels on the outskirts of Newport, but nothing really in the centre. And I know it's the council's wish at the moment to kind of rejuvenate the high street and get the economy back on track. So there's going to be a number of initiatives in the centre of Newport. The other factors to take into consideration here is that, I think location-wise, perfect. We've got overspill from centres such as the ICC, which is a massive conference centre, that the Celtic Manor, massive resort just on the outskirts of Newport, as obviously at this time it's not being used to its full capacity. The events from Cardiff and from Newport always enjoys the kind of overspill from the Cardiff events. And of course, the look of the building. The look of the building is fantastic. We're very hopeful that we can make something of this, give a good product at a decent price.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, can't promise it, but I've got high expectations at certain points later this year. We'll be able to justify charging very compelling rates from our perspective, just because of sheer supply and demand, because I think that one's got a lot going on. Okay, so second to last question, Chris. I'll sort of start off with this, but what are our plans for hotels in general going forward? So I've kind of hit upon this already, but realistically, yeah, we want to learn a lot of this, which we are doing, essentially build a playbook about how we identify good investment opportunities with regards to multi-unit deals, be that a hotel, an apartment block, a guest house, a B&B for rental or purchase. So these are different options, but kind of we would lump that all in under the multi-block or multi-unit model. Create a playbook now, essentially, and a team and systems so that we can start identifying more of these opportunities for ourselves and investors to work on, and then start rolling this out throughout the UK in areas where we identify the same kind of opportunities that we're faced with in our current investment areas. So yeah, really, I think this is, from our perspective, going to become the cornerstone of how we quickly expand our business and branding throughout the UK. The reality is we've spread up till now realistically with service accommodation units, which has been great, but there's always a bit of a balancing point where if we're moving into a new city and we take 1 or 2 units on, do we just try and kind of cover that from our current logistic base? Whereas if we just go straight in with a big unit model, then straight away, so I know that template's out the window. We're going to need to get housekeeping, maintenance, all the kind of operational stuff in place in that location. So actually, in some regards, it's good because it forces our hand then. We don't have to sort of toss up if it's worth it. But once you've got that logistics in place, it becomes easier to then consider taking other units in on the city, be that other big blocks or other individual units. You can kind of use it as your hub to begin with. So yeah, I think it's actually for us going to be quite a good expansion tool in many ways. And yeah, once we kind of done this this time and a couple more times, I think we'll have the team in place who can specialize in just going into these kind of big blocks, setting up the systems and the team. And then once that's all in place, moving on to the next one. So yeah, we want to keep this going now, really. We've got a lot more left to learn off this project, but once it's kind of up and done and running itself, then we'll kind of use this as our expansion tool. Any thoughts on that, Chris?
Yeah, there's 4 points you brought out. So the playbook factor, we're in a position that we're doing this right from the start, and what we've done is kind of documented everything and every process using a pretty good bit of software. Actually,
what a bunch of nerds! Carry on.
a pretty good bit of software, a collaboration tool called Confluence. I'm not selling, but it's something that I've worked on before, and it's kind of like a wiki page where you can add all of your kind of ideas, your thoughts, your PDFs, everything into one place, and then share that. This is quite fundamental to the strategy that we're going to kind of go down, because we want to create this playbook so that, as Ben rightly said, we can kind of mimic this and do better and improve all these things going forward and speed up the process, gain the knowledge, speed up the process. The second point is that it harks back to the investors and the lucky investors that we got with this project, because they're kind of understanding to where we're at and the journey that we're going on. So they're very understanding that we've never done this before. We want to learn this and we want to replicate, and they get it. Couldn't ask for any more kind of trust, really. That's a major thing. The other thing that Ben brought up was the hub issues. So yeah, I think what's halted our expansion slightly, and we've turned down a number of units in areas just simply because we haven't got the logistics to cope with that. And setting up a hub in any area just comes at a cost, and sometimes it's just not at the price point needed just for 1 or 2 units.
That's complexity. That's the thing. It's just like it takes up a lot of time, and we have to add in more systems, relationships, and recruit and hire. And it's just like, is the juice worth the squeeze? And actually, yeah, if it's 1 or 2 units, maybe not. But if it's a big old hotel, then yes, is the short answer.
Yeah, so using a hotel, guest house, or a multi-unit property is ideal for that kind of hub, and that'll allow us then to expand the SA business as well as that. And
we kind of did that right in the beginning, if you remember, Chris. In all fairness, we had a large kind of ex-guest house, 7 small units, so we ended up kind of bodging quite heavily with that as a bit of a logistics hub briefly. Could very quickly become untenable. We had like pillow slips inside ovens and all sorts. So yeah, not exactly the idea.
We did actually.
We did. But yeah, we had a logistics hub, and we kind of used that to move onwards and upwards.
Yeah, no, really good point. So yeah, that's the plan moving forward. That's the strategy moving forward, and try and sweep through the UK
and beyond.
And beyond.
Come on, Vegas, or Viva Las Vegas, rather. Cool. So we'll finish off on one final question, which will try and add as much value to anyone that's watching this now as possible. We've kind of done a few of these, but I kind of like to, from your perspective, Chris, I'll let you answer this one first, just to put you on the spot. What advice you have for anyone looking to get into bigger projects like this?
For anyone getting into any bigger project, what I can say from what I've learned now from this big project is to start with the compliance factors from the outset. Try and understand the amount of costs. So we've got certain criterias that we have for any kind of opening dates, and we've called this the go, no go criterias. So in your go, no go, you have all those things that will stop you or hinder you occupying that hotel with guests. This is anything from something simple, but like your linen, your condiments, all those necessary things that need to be in place. Then obviously the health and safety, the training of the staff, the HR element, the systems, fire evacuation plans, all these things, they all go onto a list called go, no go. And then we just start prioritizing them and working down the list. So that's quite a good indicator of how you want to kind of approach that. Get a system in place for documentation. Now, normally we use a system called Asana for a kind of a tick list of all the jobs and keep us kind of in checks and balances of where we are with certain things. With this project, it's a little bit more fluid. So you're finding that you're getting quotes, invoices, engineers are coming there, and you need to be a little bit more fluid with that. It's not a simple tick box exercise. So aside, we kind of moved to Confluence just to be able to give us that fluidity. So try and get that collaboration tools in place as well. Staff right from the outset, I think we got very lucky, but a little bit of design as well, that we put the right people in place to do this. We're obviously service accommodation, but we've never run a hotel. We don't know how to run a hotel, but there are people out there that do. So get them on board and factor that into everything. Staffing costs as well. You're going to be running at 24 hours a day. It's all these things that are implicated. But yes, I think right from the outset, open and transparent with the investors, get a prioritization go, no go criteria set in place. Try and get a realistic view on the budget, but allow a certain amount of what we say fudge factor in place. Thoughts from your point of view, Ben?
No, that's really good, Chris. I mean, I think you've hit all the main mechanical points. I would, again, sort of finish off with a slightly more high-level piece, which is don't be rash and don't just dive into this sort of a big model if you haven't done your homework and you aren't in a position to do it. But equally, if you are in a position where you've got a successful service accommodation business, you've got a fair few units, you've got systems in place, and actually you've got the business kind of running itself to a degree. You kind of essentially demonstrated that you're able to create a business which is a system in itself and doesn't necessarily need you working in all the time. Then really you are in a position where you can potentially replicate that. So you just go and try and find the opportunities. There are plenty right now. There will be plenty more later this year, but I would argue things I think are going to gradually improve. So there'll be more opportunities now. I would predict them there will be this time next year because the world will be hopefully in a more positive position. So if you're in a position to move now, I go look for the opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's quite an important fact, that you've got to be in a position to be able to do this and allow your business to run at the same time. So obviously I've stepped away from the day-to-day run-ins of Stay BC for the duration of this project, but we've got the systems and the personnel in place to be able to combat that to a certain degree. So yeah, it's the rashness. You have to have kind of those things in play. We've also been fortunate to have housekeeping and maintenance that can backfill into the hotel. And then conversely, when the hotel's up and running, we can use the hotel to backfill into Stay BC should that be needed. So I think get yourself to a level within your service accommodation business where it can be run and you have the capacity to take on a large project.
That's awesome, Chris. I think we've probably I genuinely think there's some real nuggets in there for anyone that is thinking to go down this slant. I hope it's been useful, guys, for those of you watching. Have you got any closing remarks, Chris?
What are your thoughts on flags, Ben?
Flags. If you have flag poles at your hotels, get flags on them ASAP. I want them up yesterday, but Chris has assured me that there might be some slightly higher priority. So I'll on that for now, but I'm expecting flags in place by Monday.
Hi, Ben. We need to get this health and safety policy done. What about my flags?
We're allowed our little nuances.
Thanks, everyone. And like always, if you've got any questions or queries, drop us a message and we'll try and get back to you. I'm going for a lie down now because it's been a long day already. Thanks very much, everyone.
Cool. Cheers, guys. Take care. Remember, if you want success, create win-wins.